So we just spent some time talking about matter, and in doing that, we already brushed up against something just as important in Aristotelian philosophy, form. One of the easiest ways to understand what Aristotle meant by form is with a very simple example. Imagine you take all the parts of a smartphone and you scatter them across the floor. You've got the glass, the circuits, the battery, the chips. All the material is there. But do you actually have a phone? Of course not. You've got a mess. What's missing isn't more material. What's missing is the arrangement, the design, the structure, the organizing principle, the thing that make those materials this kind of thing rather than just a pile of parts. That's what Aristotle meant by the formal cause. A really helpful way to understand form is to contrast it with matter. When we talk about matter, we highlighted three of its roles. Matter is a principle of individuation, change, and potentiality. To understand form, I want to introduce you to five contrasting ideas: universality, perfection, stability, actuality, and immateriality. These aren't random concepts. Together, they help capture what Aristotle meant when he said that form is the identity or nature of a thing. Let's start with universality. We say that matter is what makes things particular. Matter takes a universal like human and divides it into distinct individuals. Napoleon Bonaparte, Frederick Douglass, you, me. Matter is what makes this human different from that one. Form works in the opposite direction. Form is the universal. It's the general kind of thing, like humanity, tree, table, not as a concrete object, but as something intelligible. To make sense of this, it helps to briefly revisit Plato. Now, Plato thought that forms like beauty, goodness, humanity, and truth existed independently in what's often called the Platonic realm. On that view, a beautiful painting is beautiful because it participates in beauty itself. Beauty as such exists perfectly and independently, untouched by flaws or limitations. Now, Aristotle agreed with Plato that forms are real, but he disagreed sharply about where they exist. For Aristotle, you don't get forms floating around on their own. There is no separate realm where beauty itself hangs out. Forms only exist in matter. Beauty exists in beautiful things. Humanity exists in human beings. Treeness exists in actual trees. You never encounter form apart from matter in the real world. Form is always found in the things we experience. That's why Aristotle described reality as hylomorphic, from highly meaning matter and morphe, I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, meaning form. Everything you experience is already a composite of both. That brings us naturally to the next idea, perfection. In principle, form is oriented towards perfection. If you could somehow isolate beauty entirely from material limitations, it would be beautiful in every respect, lacking nothing. But matter limits form. No landscape, no painting, no human body perfectly realizes its form. Matter introduces constraints, imperfections, boundaries. So while form points towards perfection, matter is what makes reality finite and incomplete. Next is stability. Earlier, we talked about how matter allows change. A human being starts as a single cell, becomes an infant, then a child, then an adult. Enormous physical and psychological changes happen along the way. And yet, we still say this is the same person. Why? Because something remains constant through all that change. That something is the form. The form is the principle of stability, the aspect of a being that endures while matter changes around it. It's what grounds identity across time. Then there's actuality. We define change as the reduction of potentiality to actuality. But here's a key point. For change to happen at all, something must already be actual. A person is actually an infant and potentially a teenager. Later, actually a teenager and potentially an adult. Something has to actualize those potentials. That actualizing principle is the form. The medieval scholastics like Aquinas call this principle act. Now, form doesn't push matter around like a force. Rather, when matter possesses a form, it acts in ways appropriate to that form. A human body develops human capacities because it has a human form. A tree grows like a tree because it has a tree form. This also reveals something important. Form and matter are not equal partners. There's an asymmetry here. Matter is receptive, open, potential. Form is active and actualizing. Form takes priority because it explains what the thing is and why it acts the way it does. Finally, there's immateriality. Form, by definition, is not matter. Matter explains a certain kind of change, what Aristotle called accidental change. When a human being gains weight or grows taller, that's accidental change. The underlying substance remains human. Those physical features, height, color, texture, are what Aristotle called accidents. They are what we directly perceive and experience, but the form lies behind the accident. It isn't immediately available to the senses. In that sense, it's immaterial. You can't see it, touch it, or isolate it under a microscope. You can't put a table under a scanner and find a table form sitting inside. Does that mean form isn't real? Quite the opposite. Form is what gives a thing its identity, its unity, and its stability through change. In that sense, you could argue that form is more real than matter, not less. We don't grasp form through the senses or imagination. We grasp it through reason. Now, if you find that you cannot picture humanity itself in your mind, that's not a failure. That's exactly how it's supposed to be. Now, for living things, especially human beings, Aristotle believed the form is something special, a form that accounts not just for structure, but for life itself, growth, movement, perception, feeling, thought, and choice. He called this form the soul. Now, we've mentioned that before, but now we're finally in a position to take it seriously and to go deeper. And that's where we'll turn to next. Well, thank you for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video.